Good morning, everybody. Like Katie said, my name is Marisa. I'm one of the pastors here, and I have four kids down here. And I am excited to be down here with you today. I wanted to tell you guys the message today is a little bit hard in some ways, so I just want you to know that we're talking about families, and if your family is anything like mine, growing up, that none of our families are perfect. So let's just get that out of the way up front. None of us have a perfect family, and so as we go through this, just know that there's no expectation that anybody's family is perfect. But when I was growing up, I was headed into middle school, and I moved next door to this family. We moved a lot. So we moved every couple of years when I was younger, and we moved into this house, and the family next door had a girl that was my age. And I was super excited because there's a built-in friend right next door, and we got to know each other super well. And we would do these long sleepovers in the summer where I'd go to her house, she'd come to my house, I'd go to her house. But as we did that, I started to recognize the differences in our families. And I always knew that my family was what I considered a little different than other families. And when I went over to her house, her parents would sit down, everybody ate dinner together, and they would talk about their day, and their parents listened to them and listened to their opinion. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Who does that? And I started to notice that her family was different than mine. And I don't know if you've had that experience with some of your friends. We all have the idea of what kind of family we'd like to have, but then as we get older, we start to notice the differences maybe in someone else's family and ours. And that can be challenging because we all love our families and we want the best for our families, but every one of us can probably share a story about our family being less than picture perfect, right? If we went around. So it's not the social media version of family. Everybody puts their best pictures first. You know, you get to edit that stuff. You get to only share what you want on social media. But sometimes at home, it's different than what's put out there, what people see on a regular basis. So, but in one way or another, every family has its challenges. So on the board, it says my family, me, and in the middle, there's these three words. So maybe, like mine, your family lived with tension in your family. You didn't talk about it. Maybe there weren't like these huge fights, but you never really talked about the elephant in the room. Maybe there was tension from different aspects of your life as a family, and you don't talk about why maybe mom and dad are stressed out or about finances or different things. Some families have secrets. Some families deal with things like maybe it's a legal problem in your family or something that has happened that you just don't talk about outside of your family. And it leaves you feeling like there's this secret that you carry around that maybe your family has that nobody else has. And then there's also deep wounds that families carry around. Some people go through what are called earthquake events in your family, where maybe it's a divorce or the death of a family member or something that totally changed the landscape of your family, and your whole family changed when that happened. And if that's the case, if any of those things are something that you deal with, I just want you to know you're not alone, number one. And these are more common than you might think. I also want to preface what I'm going to say today with the fact that what I'm talking about is not if your family is dealing with or has dealt with in the past abuse. So I'm not talking about if there's a situation you had to leave or had to separate from for a time to get help. I'm not talking about those situations. if you're in a situation like that, please know that the staff here at church, Katie and Ryan, your small group leaders, they want to be here for you and support you. They want you to have resources. There's people at school that you can talk to that are safe adults. That's not the kind of situation I'm talking about. And so as I talk about how to deal with these things, I'm not saying that though that situation is okay or that you just have to deal with it, okay? So please know that if something like that's happening, talk to a safe adult. Don't leave without sharing with somebody, because you aren't meant to be in a place where you're being physically, mentally, or emotionally hurt, okay? So this is a little different. We're talking about, we all have the idea of an ideal family that we wish we had, and then we all have real families that aren't perfect, that aren't ideal, and somewhere in between, there's a lot of pain between those two things. There's the ideal, and then when you realize my family's actually real and broken, and what happens with that gap? What happens with the in-between? What do we do with that? So we're going to talk about that today. Just remember a couple things. Every family is imperfect. I'll keep saying that because I want you to know, no family, no matter what you see on the outside, is perfect. My friend's family, as I got to know them, I realized some of the things that they struggled with that my family didn't. We were two different families and had different challenges. But we don't have to, we all have an ideal family, but we don't have an ideal family, but we have a real family. So, and when we realize that, and we have that pain in the gap of those two things, there's one of two ways that usually you respond or react to that. One is to count yourself out, or one is to count your family out. So, and because of that, we think that these things in the middle are written in permanent marker, and that our family and us are written in erasable marker, where it can just be removed. But these things can feel like are permanent, that they're just going to be there forever, and that's the only thing that we will ever know or see. But God has a different plan and purpose for you and your family. So when we talk about counting your family out, sometimes maybe a parent can hurt us. Maybe they lied to you. Maybe they broke your trust. Maybe they just didn't live up to who you thought that they should be, because they're not perfect people. And so you start to count them out. Or maybe a sibling hurt your feelings, or you guys are just so different, you feel like you're oil and water and you fight all the time. I know I'm not the only family that has dealt with that. But you start to count that sibling out. You're like, okay, this is how it's going to be. We're just going to deal until we're out of the house. You start to count out your family. But then the other thing that we do is we start to count ourselves out. We think that we are removable, that we don't have a place in our family, that we don't have a purpose. You start to isolate. You stay in your room. You think, okay, I'm just going to hang out until I get out of here and I go to college or I go get a job, and when I'm 18 or 20, I'm done. And you just start to check out, and you give up on yourself being part of the solution. Those are two ways that we typically respond to that gap and that pain. There's no pain like family pain, because you feel this deep inside of you. It's not supposed to be this way, but it is, so what do I do? So what do we do with that? How do we respond to that? And how do you talk to God about that? Are we supposed to talk to God about that? We're supposed to talk to God about all things, and He knows what's happening. So how do we go to Him and talk about those things? So we're going to look into that today. So the good news is that God has a long history of working with imperfect, changing, different, or dysfunctional families. Oh, good. He's got a plan, and he has all throughout the Bible stories of working with families that aren't perfect, with families and people who are not perfect, who mess up, who have screwed up a lot, and they don't, but he still uses them. So one of the most famous people in the Bible is a man called Abraham. And God told him, promised him, that he would be the father of nations. But when God promised him that, he had no children. And he's like, how's that going to happen? So he ended up having a son named Isaac. And Isaac had two sons named Esau and Jacob. And so we're going to talk about Jacob and Esau, because out of them came that great nation that Abraham was promised. But Jacob and Esau couldn't have been more different. And this caused a lot of family drama. So we're going to look at that today. Esau was a hunter. He was a warrior. He went out and he killed things, and he was living off the land, and he was just different than Jacob. Jacob liked to be at home. He was an artist. He was a poet. He was just built differently. But he was also a liar and a little bit of a con artist. And so we're going to look at that. As the oldest brother, Esau was guaranteed a birthright. That means, according to the customs of the time, that as the oldest, he would get, when his father passed away, he would get twice the inheritance, twice the money of anyone else, any of the other children, just because he was the firstborn. It also meant that he would get a blessing from his father before he passed away. And that blessing also meant that God would bless him. So this was a really huge deal at the time. Birthrights meant a lot. It wasn't a small thing that he had the promise of this birthright. So one day, Esau went out hunting, and when he came home, he was really hungry. Now, one of my sons just started football, so this is like after practice, starving, I'm going to eat everything in the house, kind of hungry. That's how he was when he came back from hunting. And Jacob was cooking, and Esau asked his little brother for some of the stew, and that's when things kind of went off the rails. So we're going to look at that in Genesis chapter 25. So the boys grew up, and Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, the father, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, so he had his favorite. And Rebekah, the mom, loved Jacob, so they each were picking favorites there. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that stew. I'm famished." Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." So he's asking him to sell him that inheritance, that blessing, that promise, this huge thing for a bowl of stew. "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. I mean, that's a little dramatic. I mean, he's hungry, but has anybody ever been that dramatic when you're hungry? I get a little hangry sometimes. Esau said, "What good is the birthright to me?" He's basically like, I'm going to die any second. What's the point of having a birthright? But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some stew. He ate and drank, and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. So that he sold his birthright to his brother for a bowl of stew. And it was an instantaneous kind of decision. He said, "What does it matter? This is what I need right now. I'm going to do this." But this is also classic sibling rivalry. Esau wanted something right away. Jacob took advantage of it and said, okay, you want this? I'm going to take away your birthright because I'm going to sell that to you, the stew to you for your birthright. So I don't know about you, but if you have siblings, you know about family drama, whether it's over the remote, a seat, who got up when, things like that. Family drama happens. So fast forward to when Isaac was dying, and Jacob did in fact get the birthright blessing that was meant for Esau. In response, Esau was so bitter and angry that he decided his only course of action would be to kill Jacob. That makes sense, right? Oh, he's so mad about something he chose to do that he's now going to kill his brother for being deceived. So when Jacob learned this, he ran away from home with no plan to return. This is family drama, like at the highest level. Despite all of that, Jesus came from this family. God knew their mess and saw how imperfect they were, but he didn't run away from them. He used them anyway. So even though God saw how messed up they were, and he still used them to bring Jesus into the world. So don't count out what God can do through you and through your family. No matter what's happened, no matter what mistakes have been made by you or someone else, God's not done bless you, with your family. God's not done with you. Not only did God use this family to bring Jesus into the world eventually, thousands of years later in the New Testament, it records that this story is part of the lineage of people and families that God used to show what his kingdom is like. So in Hebrews 11, it says this: by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. Now, the writer of Hebrews, he's not showing them as this perfect family that never messed up. He's showing that the reason that they're part of this is that they are mentioned to draw attention to who God is. A God who can take any challenge, messiness, hurt, or dysfunction from any family and bring good out of it. So, you're probably all thinking of your various families or extended family, thinking, I don't know what God could do with that mess. I know I've thought that, but whether it's your family or another family, God isn't done just because people mess up, just because we're imperfect. From God's perspective, there's no family you can count out, and there's no person in a family you can count out, because it's not about us. It's about the God who can move mountains through us and can do things in spite of our messiness. So with Jacob and Esau, it tells us that even in our worst family moments, our family story isn't over. God's love for you and everyone in your family is thicker than water. To God, you are not like family, you are family. Even if we can't see it right now, we can trust that God has a plan. So, my guess is that if you would have asked Jacob and Esau in the moment if God was doing something good, they would have said, no way. I mean, Esau wanted to kill his brother. Jacob had to run away to save his life. I can't imagine that they're like, yep, I see the plan. I know how this is going to turn out for good. And sometimes we can't see the plan that God has for our family right away, but we have to trust that he has a plan and a story that's not done yet. So, for some of us, we have to trust that family is thicker than water, even when things get muddy. And that God has a plan for our family. Everybody who lives at your house is an imperfect person, including you. And it's okay, because when they mess up, or when you mess up, don't write them or yourself off as done or count yourself out. Because God is always working, even when it doesn't look like it. So don't count them out. Don't count your family out as done. When you fight with your sibling and they make a mistake, you can have grace for them and understand, because you've been there. You've made a mistake, and you can turn around and have that grace for them too. When you and your parents are fighting, don't write them off completely. Just choose to re-engage after you've cooled down. Talk through things. And don't count yourself out. You don't know what's going to happen next and what God has in store for you. So don't check out just yet, because God has a plan for you and a purpose that can impact your family. Don't isolate. When stuff gets tough, don't isolate yourself, because you can be an impact for your family for good too. I don't care what your age is. Sometimes the best lessons I've learned are from my kids. And I had to be willing to listen, but God has taught me so much through them when I've been willing to hear God speaking through them. When you're aggravated or annoyed, challenge yourself to hang in there, to keep talking, to act like the people in the room matter to you, because you know that they do, even when they're annoying and when you're annoying to them. So, like I said, know that if you're in a different situation than what we talked about here. That's not what I'm talking about. And it's okay to step away to get the help and the healing that you need, but don't isolate from talking to the people that God's put in your life, because we're meant to walk connected to other people, to walk through things and talk to people and get that help from other people. You're not alone. Redeeming and fixing things is what God does best. He's a God of restoration. He's a God who wants good and hope for you, and he has a plan to take broken things and make good out of them, including our families and each of us. What if we all went home and treated our family like they matter to us and like there's a purpose for our family? I think a lot would change. What if we started acting like our family and ourselves were written in permanent marker, and these things were written in expo marker, where you could just start working through them? Not pretending like they're not there, but working through them, and that your family and you are permanent. That's a choice that we can make. And we're not alone, because God can give us the strength and the power to do that. So as you head out, remember that God hasn't given up on your family or you, so don't give up either. Can I pray for you guys? Yes. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for these guys and their willingness to hear from you today. Lord, I pray that you'd empower them to take the next step for themselves and for their families, to see things differently, see things through your eyes, and not count their family out or themselves out, and know that you can work good in each situation, even when they don't know how. But I pray that you'd help them to be obedient to the next thing you're calling them to. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. If you really liked it, hit subscribe below. And if you want to check out some other videos that we have on our channel, click right over here. and if this video up here is one that's specifically picked out for you. Thank you again for watching.